Yo, what's up? It's Jimmy on from Glitchy Thumbs. We're making characters and we're making games the glitchy way. In today's episode, we have character 3.3. We're building in Buildbox. It was a spooky ghost. I came up with a cool idle animation. If you want to see how that video went, check out the last video that we did with Blender. You'll be able to see how I created the animation and also how I created the character. Let's just see what I built with it in Buildbox. Let's go. I open up Buildbox. Click create new game, 3D game, drop in FBX for character 3.3, click import, click the cube, put -1 in the position for the Y-axis, and that brings the cube down. I tend to do this in case I use it as a platform. I'm most likely going to get rid of the ground, which is the grass right now. I click the character, click edit. Ooh, wow. I never sneezed in a recording before. That was intense. But I put, all right, give me a minute. Whew. All right. Change the outline from white to black. Uncheck receive shadow. Click play. I always forget that the cube is going to rise above the grass floor because the physics are set to dynamic. Instead of falling down, it rises up. Click the cube, change the physics from dynamic to none, click play. We have character 3.3, spooky ghosts with this cool idle animation where the arms go in and out. That's as simple as it gets. It's not looped because I didn't check looped just yet. We can do so here on the right side. That way our animation just keeps looping over and over. We can see that looks pretty cool for character 3.3, the spooky ghost. Adjust the view so we can see the front of the character. Zoom in, we can see more of that nice mouth that I created in Blender with the texture. This is one of the benefits of having the mouth onto the texture right on the body mesh. The mouth actually moves with the arms and it looks like the mouth is animating, but it's not. It's just the mesh being deformed in place. It looks pretty cool. Now the ghost just looks like he has a mustache. I might actually make that mouth area a different color, possibly like a brown color for a mustache. That's what it really looks like to me right now. We can probably give it like some sort of hat as well, like a sombrero or something. We'll just have to see. That's what I'm seeing right now as I'm watching this video. For the camera, you can leave it as is or use whole numbers. Whole numbers just make it easier to transfer later on to a different project. If you like this specific camera view, it's just easier to type in whole numbers in a different file than it is with all these decimals. I click ground, remove the grass to no ground, click play. I just really liked everything in Grayscale. It just makes all the colors go away, so we don't really focus on the coloring at this moment in time. Everything is just gray and our focus is less about colors and more so about what the game mechanic is and what we're going to come up with. We have the white platform, we have our gray character, it has a little bit of shading, it has the animation. So what can we do now with the character and the platform? We're trying to get a view that we like. I think that view is good. I do a little bit of organizing in terms of the characters within this character set for character set 3. This is just random. Sometimes I put the textures in front and then next to it all the FBXs. I did a little bit of organizing recently in the folders where I separated each character by folders in the Blender file, but that's easier to manage than seeing a long list of texture files and FBX files. We have a lot of animations for the future characters that I'm going to be making videos about. You'll be able to see that. Since we have so many FBX files, I needed to organize them. Since we have this texture file for character 3.3, I open it in Adobe Photoshop. This is actually the first time that I actually considered trying to use a different color for the character. I remember how to do this process before in Photoshop. I've just never done it in a recording before. This is actually going to be the first time I recorded this. Hopefully this process wasn't confusing. And again, I always have to mention this. These are old videos. I'm just playing a little bit of catch up, trying to narrate and record everything. Just try to create some storytelling for each of the characters, how I created them, how I created the design, how we brought it into Buildbox to create a mechanic. You're going to be able to see that with all the characters that I'm working on. So that's the story behind it, seeing how I expand and create the character development. Even if I don't, it's still cool to actually go back and rewatch all the videos to see my progress as I'm creating all these characters and also creating all these game mechanics and how I come up with certain ideas. Within Photoshop, you have this texture file. This is what we created in Blender and what we saved. These are the colors. that are being applied on top of our 3D model. If you want to see that video, definitely go check out Character 3.3 Blender video. You'll be able to see how I came up with the entire workflow process. Nothing's missing from that video. It's a pretty long video, but you'll definitely get some pretty good nuggets out of it. So I'm using the Magic Wand tool, and with this Magic Wand tool, it allows you to select a specific color or a specific area within your texture. You can see I selected this light gray, and we're only able to select the light gray at the moment. I forget the actual hotkey. I think I'm pressing shift to actually select this darker gray. It allows me to select that shape within our texture. I do the same thing for the bigger version of it. This one's the one with the mouth or the mustache, however you can see it. With this selected, I paste it into a new layer, click into the color. I choose this blue color that I already have in my swatches. Go to edit, click the paint bucket tool, and select that gray color that I have selected. Go back to the Magic Wand tool. I actually don't know if there's hotkeys for these tools. There probably is, but I tend to just select it from the toolbar. I select this darker gray. From here, we need a darker shade of the blue. So you can drag this color picker down. What I do is drag down to the right, and then we'll get some sort of darker shade of our blue color. Click the paint bucket tool and fill it in. There we have a blue color with a darker blue color shade for the front of the texture, because this is the one we had our UVs large. That's the one that's being wrapped in the front. For the smaller one, we're going to be doing the same thing. Select the lighter gray with the Magic Wand tool. This time use the Eyedropper tool. I think that's what it's called. Grab the blue color and then press X. You can see the color switched on the toolbar. That allows us to eyedrop and select the darker shade blue as well. That way we have both of the colors, and we can press X to swap back and forth. These are the two colors we're going to use to fill in the smaller texture on the right side. The lighter gray, we're going to fill with the lighter blue, and then use the Magic Wand tool to select the darker gray. Press X. It's going to switch our color to the darker blue. Paint bucket, fill it in with the darker blue. We pretty much changed our texture from gray to blue just now. That was as simple as it gets. This is a way to change your textures within Photoshop quick and easy without having to bring it into Blender again. I tend to use Photoshop sometimes because there's better organization. You can create layers, you can create groups, you can save everything that you do in terms of texturing. It's just easier to work with sometimes. I've done this various times with previous projects of mine. It's just a simple thing that I remember to do. This is fairly new to me because I'm bringing the textures into Photoshop. I normally never have done that because I never did my own characters. Being able to bring the textures into Photoshop is pretty awesome. It makes the process super smooth because I understand how Photoshop works. This is just a way to have your simple colors applied on top of your 3D models without having to go back into Blender and dealing with all the selecting faces and stuff like that. This is super simple, super easy. This is why it's important to make sure you cut your UVs a specific way so that you know where to fill the colors if you do use colors in your textures. It just makes the process so much easier. Now we need to export this. Go to File, Export, and you can click the Quick Export as PNG, and then you can save this to your folder. Make sure to rename it. I did that with an extension of blue. That way you have two of the textures, one for the gray and then one for the blue. You can save this Photoshop file on your computer in case you want to go back and reuse this. Makes everything so much easier. You can save it as the same name. Everything is labeled already and we don't have to worry about typing things in. That's pretty much how I like to do things. Label everything early on so that we know what character it is, what folder it is, what the file is, and we can see that within the thumbnails. It's easily traceable. If I ever come back to this character, I'll know that, okay, this is the blue texture that we did. Now that we have this new texture, we can bring this into Buildbox. Go into the scene, and then you have this texture area where you can drop in the new texture. Let's drop in the blue one, just like that. Character 3.3, the spooky ghost, is now a blue spooky ghost. That's a way to actually apply some colors on top of your 3D models. Now super fast, actually. This is normally how you do it in some game engines. Buildbox doesn't use like materials and stuff like they have in Blender, so you have to do it on top of a texture file. For the outline, you can leave your old texture in there. It doesn't really do anything. You can remove it. You can see it's still the same. The outline, you don't have to really worry too much about the texture. It's just mainly for purpose of getting the black outline on the outside. You click Assigned, I click Play. You can see we have this cool spooky ghost animation, but now in blue. This is why I like to think of colors later on in the process. It's because you don't really know what the color is going to be for your character or whatever objects you're using just yet. It has to be, well, at least for me, it has to be later on in the process when everything else is already built, like the character 3D model is already built. We have some sort of platform. I've already seen it in the gray color. So what would it look like with a color that I like? Blue is my favorite color. So we applied the blue color. Look at it now. The focus is really popping with the character because he's blue now. The eyes are very focused on the character. That lets us know, okay, blue is like a neutral color that you can use. At least for me, blue is like water, somewhat calm, relaxed. It doesn't make you alert or anything. That's why I like using the blue color most of the time. We're going to need to adjust the view some more as I'm adjusting the values in the camera settings. I'm looking for a specific view for this character, trying to see what I can think of. I click the cube, I change it to blue cube, expand the 3D model, change the color to blue using the eyedropper tool. We can use the eyedropper tool directly onto our 3D model and grab this blue that we already have in front. That's the fastest way to get colors to be of similar colors for your separate objects. If you don't like that, you can also color pick the darker shade and see how that looks. Having the darker shade for the cube actually looks pretty good because then the lighter blue stands out more for our character. The cube is actually less focused because of the darker shade. I go back to the lighter blue, back into Photoshop, and in the swatch, I select this pink with the eyedropper tool or the color picker tool. I forget which one it's called. It's pretty much the same thing. Eyedropper tool, color picker tool, same thing. You guys understand what's going on. I duplicate our blue layer so that way we have a separate layer that we're going to apply for the pink. I select the darker blue, fill it in with this pink color that we selected from the swatch. I do the same thing for the smaller one of our texture. We're going to need a lighter pink. Click into the color, bring it up, and then somewhere to the left, that gives us a lighter color pink. Use the magic wand to select the middle. You can shift select both sides. I think it's shift. I always get confused. It's always like shift and control, but you know, you guys understand how to select double things. If you don't, just go into Photoshop and just click buttons. That's literally what I do. That's how I learn hotkeys. When I stumble upon certain hotkeys, I'm just like, oh, that was a hotkey. I hardly look at the hotkeys on the internet unless I really need that specific hotkey for a tool that I always use. Then I'll look it up. Sometimes I'd just rather use what I know first, whichever one that I'm constantly using over and over. That's a really important hotkey that I should remember. Use the paint bucket tool. Fill it in. Now we have a pink color for character 3.3. Spooky ghost. Not as spooky with this pink color now. Go to File, Export, quick export as PNG. Add a pink extension to this texture. I'm actually going to duplicate our character and then rename this to pink. Also the same for the blue, rename it to blue. For the pink version, go into the subscene, click edit. In the texture itself, if you click edit, you can actually change the hue of the blue color. That actually makes it much more easier than having to go back into Photoshop and change colors. If you use the slider, pretty much go through all the colors in the rainbow and you can see whichever version you like. That's the even faster way to do it. Possibly I could use this pink that's already within the hue and you can find a pink color that you like. It's not going to be the same pink that I used in Photoshop. But that's the other benefit of using Photoshop. You can actually use the colors that you like and not the ones that's being provided within the software. But this is like a different hue of our blue color. But if you're just trying to test something simple and just need various colors, this is a faster way to do it. In Buildbox, click save. Now we have this pink color for character 3.3. That pink is definitely different than the pink I chose. It's a little bit more of a hot pink. The one I chose is more like a lighter pink, like cotton candy in a sense. The thing is, when you duplicate your character within Buildbox and you apply a different texture on top of it, like I did with the pink, and you're basically using the blue texture file and applying pink hue on top, it actually changes the texture for the original blue one. That's what we don't want. We wanted to have two separate characters, one for blue, one for pink. That way it doesn't work. That's why I changed it back to blue. If you don't click save, it reverts back to pink. Make sure you click save after you revert it back to blue. If you want your character to have all of the same colors, you can do it this way, but it'll be applied to all the duplicates using that texture. If you want a separate texture with a different color, then you have to drop in the new texture like I'm doing here with the pink on top of the blue texture we already have. That way, Buildbox has two of our textures, one for the pink, one for the blue. You still have to delete that duplicate if you want a separate character. We actually have to drop in a new FBX and make sure we check create new. That way we have a new character of character 3.3, but it's not a duplicate of the one that we dragged in earlier. Now we have two separate FBXs. And rename this to pink. This is the correct way to do it if you want separate characters of the same character. You can move this to the side. This one's the one with the gray color. We need to do the same things that we normally do. Uncheck receive shadow, changing the outline from white to black. First, dropping in a blue texture and then changing the hue so we can test out how that pink looks like first. This one's a little bit more of a hot pink, not my preference, but it works. This is actually being applied on top of both of our characters, most likely because there's only one blue texture. Even though you drag in a new one, it's still the same blue texture. If I wanted a different texture for the pink, I probably had to rename the blue texture, but I didn't do that. So I just used my pink texture because that way it didn't work at the time. This way is just so much easier, dragging in our own texture with the colors we want. We already know that it's pink. This one works. Now we have character 3.3, the spooky ghost, in a blue color and then a pink color. They're contrasting colors now. Now we have to figure out what the game mechanic is going to be for this character. So I delete the pink character from the start scene, duplicate the start scene, rename it to 1, delete the character in this scene, select the blue cube. First, before we do anything, let's click play to see how the scene looks like. We see character 3.3, spooky ghost with the idle animation. It's sitting right on top of the blue platform, blue cube, blue platform. Since we duplicated the scene 1 is being spawned infinite amount of time. That's why you see those platforms in the back of us. That looks pretty cool already. It looks like a bunch of stairs at the moment. We can actually make the stairs if we wanted to, but this is similar to character 1.4, Mustache guy, and that game mechanic. I've actually never built a stairs game, never thought to build one. Maybe I'll have some stairs for the spooky ghost in a second mechanic. Since this is already recorded, maybe there'll be a stairs game where the ghost has to hop up the stairs. For scene 1, I'm going to move the blue cube to the left side. You just type in the values in the x-axis, in the negative if you want to move it to the left. Duplicate scene 1 to create scene 2. This is how we're going to create our new levels. Since everything is randomized, it'll just randomize between 1 and 2. And scene 2, if I put a positive 2, it moves it to the right side. When I click play, we have a bunch of left side cubes and then one right side cube because that's how it was randomly generated. I click into the character and add a touch node. Whenever we touch the screen, something happens. I was looking for the switch. When we touch the screen, it'll switch between two different movements. Depending on what I came up with, we're going to need a UI screen first. Go into the mind map, add your UI, connect it to the 3D world, add a control button. This first control button is going to be on the left side. You can scale this so that this button is on the left of the screen. Duplicate that and rename it to right so that we have two buttons now, one for pressing on the left side of the screen and one for pressing on the right side of the screen. Back into the character, I add a UI button. In the UI button, we can change it to left and right. We didn't really need the touch actually. We can just connect this to start. And then we're going to need a jump node with a value of 10 in the y-axis and a value of -5 in the z-axis. The jump force linear. For the jump force angular, I wanted to see how it would look like if it rotated and create some sort of angle in the y-axis. So we'll just leave that. I didn't press enter, which has always been my issue for this. I don't know why this is even a problem within Buildbox. Should have been fixed already. I don't know. It's just part of the program, I guess. If you don't press enter for your values, they might not change. This time I'm using 5 in the y-axis z. I use -5, 2 in the y-axis for the jump force angular. Click play. The ghost actually slips through the cube, which is cool for a ghost character, slipping through things. That's actually something that I wanted to use for one of the previous characters, slipping through things, going invisible. This could actually work for character 3.3, spooky ghosts. You just need to apply some sort of transparency on the character so it feels like the ghost slipped through things. That's actually a pretty good idea that could apply for the spooky ghost. Possibly he might be able to slip through objects to get in areas, hide and seek, or steal things. Or I don't know, maybe that's part of the game mechanic. where you play as the ghosts, and your goal is to revisit various memories of places that you remember. Try to remember certain things within that level that you need to do in order to complete the level. Maybe it's a memory game where you have to do certain things to figure out a puzzle. You play as this ghost, so you have to like slip through things and do a whole bunch of stuff. I don't know. That's an idea I'm thinking about right now as I'm recording this video, and that could possibly work. Or we could just have a simple game where you slip through the correct color based on the color you are. So it's like a color switching game based on the famous color switch game. So that could work too. There's just various different mechanics I can make depending on whether I want to expand this character. I mean, that's already a bunch of ideas that I can put together. So I might be able to go back and expand upon this for character 3.3. In the start for the character, we need to change the physics to dynamic. That way we don't slip through. Interesting that the character was slipping through with a physics of none. Is that really what happens? I don't know, actually. Anyways, I add an if collide. Since we have physics on our character now with the dynamic, we want the collision shape with the F collide collision shape to keep the collision shapes the same size. It's easier to adjust both of them at the same size. And I click into the blue cube, give it a collision group of platform, and change the physics from none to kinematic. That allows us to interact with our character since the character is dynamic and the cube is kinematic. For the collision shape, we can adjust both the start collision shape and the if collide that we added together at the same time. You don't have to have the collision shapes the same for both start and if collide, but I tend to do it. It just makes more sense to me doing it this way so that it's the same for both. That way I don't have to do separate ones at different times. Saves me time in my project, makes everything easier. You can click play. Now we have Spooky Ghost sitting right on top of the blue cube. When I tap the left side, let's see what happens. Spooky Ghost does a jump. This actually looks pretty cool with the jump force angular like that, like some sort of rotation. Looks like we're shooting the ghost forward. So I changed the 5 to a 10 in the y-axis for the jump force linear, the -5 to a -7 in the z-axis for the jump force linear. Press play, tap again on the left side. Our character just flies super far. That looks pretty cool. It's like we're throwing the ghost character across the screen, trying to land onto one of the blue cubes. I actually unhook the left button so we can use this touch node. Whenever we touch the screen now, it'll just launch this character with the jump node. Pretty much the same mechanic. I can just tap wherever on the screen now, not only on the left side of the screen. That's the way to have separate buttons on your UI screen for different functionality using the UI button as a node, similar to what I did just now. If you found that super useful, definitely use that for your projects. I don't know what happened. Looks like I tried to touch the screen and nothing happened. Maybe, I don't know, actually. It's weird because there's no like hotkey buttons that show up on the side like there is in Blender. So I can't really explain what I was clicking at the time other than what's on the screen. I really like that add-on that they have in Blender. You can actually see what I was clicking at the time. There's definitely no add-on for Buildbox, so I have to just verbally explain it. I connect back the UI button for the left, just move that right button to the side and expand this left button. So it's like a full screen button now. I guess maybe the touch node doesn't work with the jump like that. I'm not too sure why I had to do it this way, creating a separate touch. Ah, that makes sense. So with the control button, I can actually adjust it to wherever the player can actually touch to launch the character. That's why I opted to use the control button with the UI button, because I can scale this down. This area right here is the only area where the player can touch, which is the bottom area of the screen. So if they touch at the top, nothing will really happen. For the UI button, we need to make sure we change it to touch. Whenever the player touches the bottom of the screen, they'll be able to launch this ghost character forward. That's pretty cool. We don't really need this blue cube at the moment, so I change it back to white. I'm gonna scale this out to make the platform a little bit longer. So it looks like the ghost character is sitting on top of a desk of some sort since we extended the white platform. From here, we're going to launch this forward and try to land on top of the white cubes. This is like a throwing mechanic where we toss something, or we actually press the screen to throw the character. Now is a good time to save. We did some pretty good progress in the mechanics so far. So we save this in a new folder in our Buildbox folder that's already in a characters 3 folder. You can definitely understand how I label things now, just to keep every character separate so I know where everything is with all these files that I'm just saving all over the place. Now I'm going to extend the white platform to make it much more wider. I'm just going to test it this way. For scene 1 and 2, you want to just keep those scenes and not have it randomized within your preview. You can just press M to mute those scenes. You can see the red bar at the bottom is basically muting scene 1 and 2, so they won't show up in our randomized scenes. Only start is showing at the moment. We have character 3.3, the blue spooky ghost, and basically I'm tapping the screen to throw it across this long white platform. We need to extend this out a little bit more so that we can actually see this in progress. It's kind of like, what's that sand game? I forget what that sand game is called. It's like a drinking game, actually. What is it? Game where you slide pucks on sand. That's exactly what I was thinking of. I don't know what it's called. Shuffleboard. That's what I was thinking of just now, looking at this video. It's like Shuffleboard, and that's what I'm searching for at the moment on Google. So yeah, it's like a variation of that, but we're actually throwing it and not sliding it across. I'm adjusting the scene end to get to the end of the platform. I actually haven't experimented much with start and end other than putting it at the end of different platforms. That's basically what I see as the idea. This is like a shuffleboard idea, but with character 3.3, we're actually throwing it and then trying to get it to land at the end. That's how we can get points. The further we get it to the end of the platform, the more points we have. This can actually be a shuffleboard game if I just take out the jump force linear in the y-axis, so we're not actually throwing it. We could actually just be pushing it forward. I don't know if there's a mechanic for this where we have pressure on the screen for pushing. I haven't really stumbled upon that just yet, but so far this looks like shuffleboard game. That makes sense. Throwing character 3.3 on the table, get it as close as possible to the end. That's so far the beginning of this prototype. I go back into the character, go to the jump node, change the 2 to none in the jump force angular. That way we don't have this rotation on our character when we launch it forward, so it can actually just show its face forward as we toss it. That looks pretty cool. I like how it stops right at the end so that we actually have this shuffleboard idea in the recording. Since we created that game mechanic based on the nodes in Buildbox and using our character, I actually had an idea based on a node that I remembered from a YouTube video from Smart Penguins. If you don't know Smart Penguins, he used to build some pretty cool stuff in Buildbox, but I think he moved over to Unity and started building some cool stuff in that. You can check out his YouTube channel. But yeah, he created this explosion and launcher BBAsset. You can download this on his website if you want to use it for your Buildbox projects. That's what this reminded me of. I was thinking, let's just try using that BBAsset for this mechanic now. That is pretty much similar, but for my mechanic, I am just throwing it in one direction. I can't throw it, on the far left or the far right. But with his BBAsset, you can actually do that. So that's something I wanted to use. Definitely, I was going to try that out. I downloaded the BBAsset on his website, dropped it into Buildbox. That's as simple as it gets. If you have a bunch of BBAssets with a bunch of nodes that you want to use, that's the way to do it. Think of these as components that you can use for your game. There's a lot of free ones out there. There's also pretty good paid ones. That's the way to use it in Buildbox. Within this launcher mechanic, there's a custom node that Smart Penguins made. In this node, there's an asset portion where you drop in your 3D model. I'm selecting the blue character, so that way we can launch the blue character in any direction. You need to drag in the launcher into your scene. This is actually the old mechanic. I clicked play. I didn't really look at how the launcher worked other than dragging it in. I like to try to figure things out. If I can't, I'll go look at how they did it. That's just how I tend to do things. This isn't the correct one because we need to remove our blue character first. Let's see how it works with the launcher. A way to see how the launcher works, there's usually a template that other developers will use and create with their BBAsset. This one is the explosion effect. You can open that BBdoc and see how he used the launcher asset. In the scene, he has a bunch of gas barrels, which is like the objects you're supposed to hit. And then he has the launcher. The launcher is somewhat placed near the camera. That's how you have to place the launcher. It's pretty much the same thing with the launcher BBAsset. Nothing's changed in that. There's a ball asset, which is what you're launching. This one just has an if collide and debris explosions. You click play to see how this mechanic did it. When I tap on the screen, you can see this white ball comes from the camera because that's where the launcher asset is placed. When it hits the floor or anywhere, it has this animation that shows a bunch of cool colors and it says boom. It's like an explosion. That's actually pretty cool. I definitely can reuse that if I need to as an explosion in my game. I should definitely look at how he did that, but we don't need that at the moment. Back into my BB doc, we have this launcher node, and then he placed it where the camera was. I looked at the camera values of where my positioning is. I just entered the same position for the launcher BBAsset. That's why it's good to use whole numbers again, because it's just easier to type in a few numbers than it is to type in a bunch of them with decimals. Now we moved the launcher asset where the camera is. Press play, see what happens. When I tap the screen, nothing really happens. We still have our blue character in the middle of the screen, so that's why our old mechanic is still there. Back into the UI screen, I removed our touch button. Click play. Now when I touch the screen, we are actually throwing character 3.3 Spooky Ghost onto the screen. Now we have this cool mechanic where we're just tossing our character on the platform. It can slide off, move in the forward direction. It can hit the front part and bounce off. I can actually tap left and right or just anywhere on the screen. It will move in that direction, which is what I originally wanted for a throwing mechanic. We couldn't do it the way I had it with the jump node. This is actually perfect. This is how I actually wanted it. When I tap on the screen, infinite amount of times, we can throw as many of these ghost characters. The launcher mechanic is actually spawning our character. There's no limit at the moment to how many we can spawn. I just tossed it right in front of this blue one, and you can knock it off the board. Now this is actually pretty cool. This is like a mixture of the Shuffleboard game idea, but we're actually throwing things onto our platform. That's actually a pretty good idea for any game, actually. It doesn't have to be for character 3.3. It just so happened that I was using this mechanic for the spooky ghosts. But this just reminds me of those Carnival games where you throw things at different characters, different stuffed animals. That's pretty much what we're going to be building, something similar to that, because that was the idea at the time, and that's what's happening with my memory right now. I'm just jogging that memory. It's right on the dot. I drag in a sphere. That's basically the idea I had. You can see how I'm being resourceful. I look for things whenever I think it works for this game mechanic idea that I have. I try to combine various different nodes, different BB assets from wherever. Could be on the internet, could be from different folders I have. I tried to combine all of that to create some sort of cool game mechanic. This is how I literally came up with the idea as we're messing around in Buildbox. Back into the launcher, click into that node, change the BB asset to the sphere now. Now when I touch on the screen, I touch below the ghost. We see this large black sphere appear on the screen, and we're trying to knock the blue character. Now I place the mouse somewhat near the head and tap again. Now we're able to knock off character 3.3, the spooky ghost, off of the table pretty much. Now we have this game where we're knocking things off the table or the platform. One thing that would be super useful is having some sort of aim, because when I'm tapping on the screen, I don't really know where the ball's actually going other than where I tap. Possibly having an aiming cursor or some sort to let the player know where everything is going to shoot. That would actually help out. Maybe have it right before they let go. Maybe use the touch node. So when we touch the screen, the aim will show so we can actually see where we're going to throw. And then when we let go, then we actually throw the ball. I don't know if I had that. That's actually a pretty good idea. Since the ball is a little bit too big, we need to go into the sphere and adjust the scale. I adjust it to 0.5 in all the axes. Now when I touch the screen, we get a much smaller ball, still bigger than the character. We need to adjust that again, scale it down to 0.25. Pretty cool. I like how the character actually bounces back up after you hit it. It goes on the side and then balances back up. This is starting to turn into a throwing mechanic game because we have the launcher mechanic from Smart Penguins and we're applying it with our character 3.3 Spooky Ghost. That made me think of that one game in the carnivals where you're throwing the baseball to hit all these stuffed animals of clowns. That's just what I remember because I've played that game before. It was super fun. That's what we're recreating. Different shelves. That's what I'm doing with the white platforms. So think of the white platforms as different shelves, and then on each shelf we're going to have the character placed. So we have to knock it. That's why I have the blue character there. We need to adjust the camera now to get this new view of the character where we can actually see multiple characters on the screen and create that shelf look. That's what I do with this different camera view. You can see since we adjusted the camera moved, but our launcher is still in the same place. When I tap on the screen, you can see the ball appears where that invisible square is. This actually messes the mechanic because it actually has to move with the camera. I'm placing the launcher right in the middle to see what happens. So you don't actually have to have it where the camera is placed. You just need to have it somewhat on the screen, I guess. I duplicate character 3.3. We have 5 blue objects now. To hit, we need to zoom out a little bit in the camera, extend these platforms to the side. Now when I tap on the screen, our goal is to actually knock these ghosts off the shelves. We can launch as many balls as we want. I go into debug mode because it's not really knocking things correctly. I tap the screen and you can see our collision shape hasn't been adjusted just yet. Our ball is small visually, but our collision shape is still super big. So that's why it doesn't really go past the shelf. Wasn't really going through that portion, which is why I wanted to double check it. Now we need to adjust the collision shape for the sphere. We can just do so with the values in the start. We could just use the same values that we adjusted for the scale earlier on with 0.25, and we could test this again. Tap the screen. For some reason, the scale is actually still off, even though we adjusted it. I click into the sphere, and the scale still has the scale of 1 in the X and Y axis. Probably it didn't get saved as I was not pressing enter maybe. Just remember to do that. I'm telling you, it's going to be pretty annoying. Click play again. Now we have our ball that we can knock all these ghost characters. I think you do have to place the launcher asset where the camera is. That's why I looked at the values so I can actually move the launcher where the camera is and everything makes sense as we're throwing these balls to knock off all these ghosts. I just put the same values for the position. Always move things to whole numbers if you want it easily to transfer over. There's no faster way to copy and paste everything. You just have to enter in the values. Now the ball actually is being launched where the camera is, which makes sense so that it doesn't just randomly appear in a random location. You can see where I placed the mouse is directly above the character. I assume the ball is just going to move forward and knock it off, but the ball actually does a curve. We actually have to tap a little bit higher to actually hit the character. I'm actually tapping where the top shelf is, and that knocks the ghost character off the shelf. I should definitely adjust that, or I don't know, that could be part of the game mechanic, but that's a little bit weird to me. You have to anticipate that the ball is going to drop. That influences how you tap the screen when you can just tap directly on top of the character, and this should just knock the character. That's maybe something I would change. I think that's what I was trying to figure out as I changed the mass from 1 to 0. That actually looks like it worked. Now I tap on above the ghost head, but nothing happens. It's like going through the character now with the mass of 0. That's a little weird. So I changed it to 0.5, and 0.5 actually does the same thing where it drops the ball down. We can knock it now. That's a little bit weird that the mass affects it that much, especially if we have it at 0. It doesn't really come in contact with the character. I actually try it with a kinematic physics to see what happens. I'm tapping the screen. It doesn't really do anything. So I have to use the dynamic setting. That's the only way, but this one's a little weird because we're tapping on the top shelf and then we're anticipating the ball to drop down. That's something I would change now looking at this. I guess I didn't figure it out yet. I wanted to hurry up and make progress in this game mechanic. So now I'm actually adding the pink colors on the top shelf so that we have more objects to hit. This way it makes the game difficulty much harder because now we have a bunch of obstacles we need to knock off the shelves, and then we can actually have a good visual of what this game mechanic is all about so that I can record it later on so I remember this game mechanic. For the pink character, we need to change it to dynamic so that we can knock it off. The collision shapes, we also need to adjust since This is a separate character from the blue character, so it has its own collision shapes and everything. What we can do is just grab the if collide from the blue character, so it's just like the same character, connect that, and then we just need to adjust the start collision shape. I've deleted all the pink ones so that I have one to select the start. We can just use the same values from the F collide. This one has decimals. Now we have to remember all the decimals. Since I didn't change it, I tend to forget to do whole numbers. Sometimes you just want to adjust things the way it is and not worry too much about it. We need to do the same thing for the position. There's always going to be multiple areas that you need to change. I duplicate all the pink characters. Now we have a bunch of pink ghosts that we can knock. We have more objects. We can knock off these shelves. You can see the game mechanic now that I mentioned. If you remember that game in Carnivals, forget what it's called. Let's see, Carnival ball toss game. I think that's what it's called. Carnival ball toss game. Yeah, it's like a clown ball toss game that they have at Carnivals. That's really what I remember. That's what this reminds me of. Our character is just pretty much a ghost instead of a clown. That's pretty much what I remember at different carnivals. That's how this game mechanic came into my mind. I really liked that game at Carnivals, so that's why I built it in Buildbox. That's probably why I had that idea. You can see how we started with the simple mechanic of just tossing things forward, and then it led to another thing, and then led into this game mechanic. That's how my ideas kind of formulate. When I start with something, I'm in the flow and I start being creative and I see certain things, and that leads me into my game mechanic. That's the one that I end up using. This can actually be applied to any character. It doesn't have to be for character 3.3 Spooky Ghost. I can swap out this with a whole bunch of different characters so that there's different characters that you have to knock. There might be specific characters that move in place. So your goal is actually to be very precise where you tap now, because you have moving characters instead of static characters. That would actually be pretty cool. I'm adding this cube, which is supposed to be a score tracker. I don't know if I've actually finished this mechanic with the score. This cube is going to be a platform at the bottom of the screen. I changed it to a yellow color, removed the 3D model in the mesh so that we don't actually see this platform. It's just there to help us collide with the different characters. That's how we're going to keep track of the score. In the blue character, for the if collide, we changed the affected asset to score tracker. When the blue character collides the score tracker, it'll get defeated. When it gets defeated, we're going to add a point. That's how we're going to have our point system. We need to do the same thing for the pink character. Copy those nodes, paste it into the scene. In the UI, we need to drag in our default font, change it to score, keep the score type to points, the amount we change to current, so it gives us the current score. The alignment will be centered. We do stick to edge, which is pretty much the score is going to stick to the edge based on the device that you're using. So that's pretty handy. When we click play, now we have a score of 0 at the top. When I knock off this pink character, the score should increment, but it doesn't. I go into debug mode to see what happens. As soon as I go into debug mode, you can see there's this cursor that's just falling down with these thin white lines. That's because our score tracker was a cube. It's most likely set to dynamic, so our score tracker is actually falling down. It's not in place to actually collide with the different ghost characters. We need to change this from dynamic to kinematic so it actually stays in place. Now when we knock off our ghost characters, you can see as soon as it hits the floor or the score tracker, we get a point. So that's 1 point for knocking that pink ghost. I'm going to move this score tracker down so we can actually see what happens. You see the ghost character falls down, hits this blank area on the bottom of the screen, and then gets defeated, disappears. The collision shape's still there, so it's like balancing on top. That's actually pretty cool. I'm knocking another pink ghost. We don't need to worry too much about the animations because it's already having a dynamic feel to it. We'll just rotate with the physics. So now we have a score of 2. Then we have these collisions still sitting in place. I'm moving this score tracker back up. And then I changed the if collide from score tracker to the sphere because I was thinking that we should actually get the point as soon as we hit the character. Instead of having the ghost hit the floor, then we get the point. That just makes more sense because that's instant feedback that you hit one of the ghosts, and that's how the points should be incremented. I delete the defeated node for both of the characters. So that way when we hit the ghost and knock it off, it'll still be in the scene at the bottom, which is pretty cool as a visual feedback. The throwing mechanic for the launcher is definitely throwing me off. It should be fixed actually. Maybe I'll go in and see if I can fix it. I move this score tracker down just so that we can see where these ghosts land. When we actually hit it, it'll just fall and fall down on the floor. That looks pretty cool. It's like they're mini ghosts now. We could have the mechanic where we knock things and then they just pile up in this little ball of some sort, like a gumball machine. We could just knock it into some sort of clear sphere, a bowl, and then just have some sort of animation to show all the knocked ghosts. That would be pretty cool. So just having that on the screen still, not having them defeated, looks pretty cool. It's actually cool how they bounce back up. They don't just lay on the floor. This looks pretty cool for this game mechanic. This is very different from the game mechanics that I normally would think of. Normally it's the ones where it's like an endless type of game mechanic where you're doing something, but this one is a throwing ball mechanic with our character. That's actually pretty cool. We can always reuse this if I feel like this can be reused or another game mechanic. I haven't really thought about reusing this. All I know is this is the first like unique, I guess, one of the top unique mechanics that I thought of based on all the nodes that I know. That's very different. And like I said, I'm trying to think of different mechanics for each character so that I have a wide variety of knowledge of what to build in Buildbox. There's a lot of cool things you can do and there's a lot of things you can't. In order to do it, you actually have to be hands-on and be in the program to do all these different mechanics. Sometimes if you can't think about it, you might not be able to make it. That's usually what happens. I try not to think of complex things just yet unless I get the ball rolling in Buildbox and then I start building based off of what I'm building at the moment. If I know it works and if I had an idea that I saw from a video before, then I'll start implementing that. There's a lot of things you can do. This was all no code in a sense. I'm not that very good at coding. I can build nodes if I get some references, but I'm not very good with writing code, as you can see. Otherwise, a lot of my Buildbox videos would have been me creating different nodes in JavaScript. I would like to go down that route, but I just feel like that would take a lot of time. For me, I'd rather just focus on the visuals, like the art, and then also the game design, building out the levels, and then coming up with how to market the game and stuff like that. I just really like coming up with the art side and the character design, character development, game development. The coding stuff, that stuff is cool because you can build a whole bunch of different things, different softwares, but that doesn't really excite me as much as seeing like characters come alive that I came up with. More so on the art, I guess more so on the art side is just where my creativity works best. I just feel like I'm in more of a flow when I think of the art. That's just how my brain kind of works. It's more visually pleasing. I don't know how to explain it, but it's much more, I guess, exciting to me. A lot of like my brain waves just fire when I see different characters or just different ways to create game mechanics without the coding portion, of course. We still need the coding. Visual scripting in Buildbox is basically code. It's just visual. That's what works best for me. If I see everything in the mind map and also in the node system and how everything is connected, that just makes more sense to me, I guess. Also, I can read code and I understand the logic behind it, but writing code, that's, I guess, the difficult part. And in the past, I would have a lot of references for different projects that I would build in a Java class that I took. That's what really helped me, having like a bunch of cheat sheets and a bunch of sample projects that I can review and use for my tests. That was how I passed everything. That's how I do things nowadays. If there's a bunch of templates that are available, I can definitely understand how these nodes work, how the code works, an example that I can use for my own projects. That's how I do things for my games now. Now that we have this score tracker, there is definitely something going on with the score tracking. When the ball hits the ghost character, you can see sometimes it increments the score, but as the ball is still colliding with the ghost, the score is actually continuing to increment as many times as it can. But we only want 1 point per ghost character, so we needed to figure out a way to apply that. What I thought of was to use the signal point threshold node. That doesn't look correct because this one you have to connect it in and then pass something else. I've never used the signal point threshold, so I don't know what that does actually. There's a lot of nodes that I don't really know what it does. Like all the signals, I need to experiment a little bit more. I've just started using like signal filter and signal invert, so I don't really have much information for those nodes, but you'll be able to see that in the future characters on how I used it. But yeah, I just wait until I need those nodes to actually use them. Right now, I'm looking for the signal threshold, which is what I use for having the points have a threshold of 1. So it's only passing the signal once. With this signal threshold, it's supposed to just pass the signal once when I tap and hit one of the characters, but sometimes it doesn't do that, which is a little bit weird. Uncheck single event, and it's the same thing. Sometimes it increments, sometimes it doesn't. So that's not the node I needed. I click play again, and it looks like it's working, but I didn't really do anything, except this one doesn't work. For the bottom row, it works for the top row because the character actually falls down and then it's not really colliding, but on the bottom row, it's still colliding. It was definitely one of these signal nodes. I just didn't know which one to use at the time. For the sphere, I added a if collide, scaled it down to 0.25, and the collision shape is a sphere, and the affected asset is the blue character. Add a set physics, changed it to none. Whenever the sphere hits the blue ghost, we're going to actually set the physics to none. That way it doesn't keep colliding with the blue character. We'll see if that works. We also need a collide with the pink character. You can see as soon as it hits the character, the physics is changed and the ball stays in place. It's actually pretty cool to have the ball stay in place like that. Now, if we ever wanted to use this could actually be a dart game. If we throw darts on a dartboard, we can actually have the dart stick in place by using the set physics node, which is pretty cool. That's a way to use it. I didn't really think of it at the time. Now that I think of it, this can actually be a dart game where we knock stuff on the dartboard. I'm just thinking of various different game mechanics as I'm going through this video. We have a bunch of values we need to change for the linear velocity and the angular velocity. I change this all to none. That could probably be why everything was stuck in place. And nope, it's basically the physics type is none, so it doesn't really do anything because of the physics. We have to keep it dynamic. That's pretty much the only way, but we still have this issue of the score tracking. That didn't work, but at least we found out a way to use it for a new game mechanic if we wanted to use darts. I added a send node, so every time the ball collides with the pink character or the blue character, it will send some sort of signal with an event name of score. I added a receive node in the pink character with an event name of score. So instead of having the collision giving you the score, whenever the send node is triggered, then we'll actually receive that signal and then add the score. Hopefully that was the case. I'm adding in the signal threshold again with the receive node with a threshold of 1. That's just how I think it works, that there should only be one signal. That's how it should work. Whenever I hit the blue character, this is actually incorrect. We hit the blue character and it's actually incrementing a lot of times. We hit 2 characters and we got a point of 13, which is incorrect. When I turn on the signal event, kind of does the same thing. So it's kind of like there's a bunch of signals going on as the collision happens. I think that's how signal threshold works, but I have to really look into it. I've used it before and it used to work like that. I don't know if there's a bug with the signal threshold or I'm just using it wrong. This node is actually being applied in the pink character. I don't know why I'm testing with the blue character actually. It's kind of unaffected. I should actually be knocking over the pink character. I'm adding in this signal point threshold that I was always dropping in. I've never used it, so how I'm using it now, I don't know if it's correct. I'm just trying things. It doesn't seem like it works with the blue character. I still don't know why I'm testing with the blue character. I'm clearly in the pink characters tab, so I should just be knocking pink character, but I probably didn't notice. That's something you should actually pay attention to. If you're in a specific character's node map, and you're testing with another characters, it doesn't make sense. Don't do what I did, otherwise everything will be incorrect anyways. I wasn't even testing all the changes, so I don't really know if it was correct or not. Now I'm actually tossing it on the pink character, which is correct, but I moved the signal threshold before the if collide to see what happens. At the time I thought maybe we have to pass in the signal once first before we did the collision, but that doesn't work. the collision should actually be first, and then the signal, threshold, and then the add point. That's just how it works in my head, but it doesn't work on the screen at all, which is weird. I deleted the if collide and the send nodes in the sphere. It doesn't really work as intended, even with the single events checked or unchecked. It works sometimes, then sometimes it doesn't. That's a little bit weird. This is going to happen a lot in your Buildbox projects. I don't want to say there's inconsistencies, but there is, where it works and then sometimes it doesn't. And then you're really not too sure. Even if you have to look it up, your game might be just too unique or custom at the point where there's no real answers on why things aren't working correctly. If that's the case, you either have to figure it out, try a different method until it all makes sense, or just read more of the manuals to educate yourself some more. Yeah, at least that's what I do. I try to use things. If they work, they work, and then I understand how they work. If it doesn't work, then I actually have to search it up to see what I did wrong. Maybe someone figured it out before I did, and if not, I just move on. Maybe go to a different character and then figure out either the same problem with a new character, or just figure out a different game mechanic and work on that. I'm trying a bunch of various things now using the signal filter with the signal threshold, but the signal filter only passes through if it's true or if it's false. The if collide does work. It's just if the ball continues to touch the character, then the point will just continue to increment. It was correct, but it's also incorrect. At this point, you have to make the decision on whether this is good or not. I decided to not spend too much time because I already spent a lot of time on the score tracker and I couldn't figure it out. I'm going to save this for another time to figure out. I still haven't figured that out, actually. Now that I have this on video, maybe I'll go back and see if I can fix it. Now I'm actually a little bit more knowledgeable in Buildbox. But this was the game mechanic. We're going to export this to iOS. We need to go to project settings, add the bundle ID, use com, gt.tester game. I use the same bundle ID across all my characters. Go to export iOS, and I export this. We're going to run this to my device from Xcode. Go to sign in capabilities, change your team to yours, bundle display name, character 3.3, increment your bundle ID in Xcode. If you want a new app that doesn't replace your previous characters, that's just how I do it. I don't know if it's correct. Just don't upload it, that bundle ID. You can, but I'm just using that for testing purposes. Whenever you run it to your device, sometimes there's this fetching debug symbols for your iPhone, and this takes a long time sometimes. I actually click cancel running sometimes and then rerun it, and then that actually fixes it. Or you can unplug it, whichever works. Those are things that I normally do, and then I just run it and get the game on my device. That way I can have a screen recording of the character on my phone so that I remember what the game mechanic was and what we came up with and what I actually need to go back to expand if I need to. We have this video of character 3.3. The goal is to knock off these ghost characters with the black ball, or there could be balls of different skins that we add. It's very similar to the ball toss game at the carnivals with the different clowns, but this is with our ghosts. We're able to tap on any side of the screen to toss the balls. You can knock off the blue ghosts first, then move on to the pink ghosts. That's pretty much the game mechanic for character 3.3, the spooky ghost that I came up with. That pretty much concludes this episode for character 3.3, the spooky ghost. I hope you liked the game mechanic this time that I came up with the help of Smart Penguins and his explosion template with the launcher BBAsset that he had. That was super useful in my project. That was something that I had the idea of. I just didn't have the right nodes, but he was able to figure it out, and that actually helped my game mechanic. I was able to think of various different ideas that we could bring this game mechanic. Earlier on, there was the Shuffleboard game mechanic idea. I could actually build that as well with the way we had the mechanic. There's various different things that I came up with throughout this video. Possibly I need to go back and review everything that I talked about. That way I can have a bunch of notes for any time I actually go back and expand upon this idea. I should look into how to fix that score tracker node. Actually, it's actually bothering me that I didn't fix it. I don't really use the signal threshold node anymore. Maybe I should look into figuring that out. Anyways, I hope you liked this video. Please like and subscribe. subscribe if you've been following my videos and you like all the cool things that I'm coming out with all these characters and all these game mechanics. Trying my best to play a little bit of catch up with all my content. I've been trying to narrate all my characters as best as I can and try to remember what I did, but these are a lot of old videos. I'm just playing catch up. I want to get to a point where I'm actually up to date, so the character that I'm working on would be the one that I would narrate. That's why I'm narrating this video as quick as possible for all the characters and playing a little bit catch up before doing more characters. But anyways, if you like this process, let me know what you think of my entire process. Is it fun? Is it boring? I don't know. Just type something. Let me know some feedback. I'm always going to be making characters. I'm always going to be making games the glitchy way. I really like that. The way I do it, I feel like it's a specific way. It's like my way. That's why it's the glitchy way. Anyways, appreciate your time, and I'll see you in the next video for the next episode for character 3.4. Check out all my old videos. You know what I'm saying? Peace out.